What's up, everybody? Welcome into another edition of SSPN Live, and it is our first edition of SSPN Live, over 1,000. So we have super chats, all that good stuff. I don't even know what else to say, Ethan, but thank you to all the new subscribers that have been here. We're growing at a really fast rate since all the Wemby stuff started.
Mhm.
Um, yeah, Ethan, that's
Yeah.
my opening intro.
No, you said it. You said it best. Thank you so much, everybody, for being in here and for subscribing. This is crazy.
Yeah, for sure. So obviously, as you guys can tell, we're going to dive into some Spurs lineups with Wemby and how he's going to fit in. What are the potential things that the Spurs could do going into next year? All the different categories that we can think of. I thought of three. Two are probably really unlikely, but we'll kind of discuss the likelihood of those and all the possibilities, like I was saying. But before we get into that, Victor Wembanyama is in the LNB playoffs right now against Cholet. So we're
Yes,
we're we're Metropolitans 92 till the end, right, Ethan?
absolutely, absolutely.
Right here in the French league. But he had a great playoff debut. There were some struggles that me and Ethan also saw, but you guys can watch all those games free on the NBA app. And that's not just on your phone. Like if you have a Roku or you have a smart TV, which a lot of people do these days, if you just go to the NBA app, you don't even have to create an account. You can just get the app and then watch the games on there for free. So that's really cool. And he had 22 points, 10 boards, 5 assists, 2 steals, and 2 blocks, Ethan. That's
Mm.
just the stat sheet. But what did you see from watching Wemby in the first playoff game that they won? They're up 1-0.
I didn't get a chance to watch the first half live. I caught the little highlight reel that they posted it at halftime, where he had 15 points in 16 minutes or something like that, and was really getting going in that first half with some crazy highlights, playing exactly how we know he can play, being an incredible scorer and a unicorn, and all those great things, and a shot blocker, and really just an impact player. In the second half, when I started watching the game, he continued that, but I think is it Cholet? Is that how you say it?
I believe.
Okay, Cholet, they started sending double teams quick, pretty much on pass. So he had a little bit of issues, continuing the dominance as far as scoring the ball. And he showed flashes of having good instincts at passing out of double teams, but at the same time, it felt like to me that sudden triple team from Cholet kind of got into his head a little bit. So he had a little bit of turnover issues. At
He
the end
got
of
off
the day,
balance a lot of times because of the swarming,
yes, because of the swarming
which
was
led to
was
the
crazy.
turnovers. And like you were saying, that
Exactly,
affected him.
exactly. I think he had at one point I know he had 6 turnovers to his 5 assists. I don't know what he ended up finishing with. I don't have the stats in front
That's
of
what
me.
he ended up finishing with.
Okay. So, obviously not the best stat in the world, but something that he'll hopefully work through, especially with Pop. Pop doesn't really tolerate turnovers, so he'll have to get better at that. And plus the spacing was kind of messed up for Metropolitan to 92. It kind of felt like they were cutting needlessly and clogging the
That's
paint for no
that's
reason.
just the French league or the Euro league.
That's just the
That's
style
something
of play.
that's much more common. I mean, like the final score was 74 to like
Mm,
64 or something.
yeah.
That's usually where they range. So I think that's just kind of a product of that. We had a guy in our comments a while back on one of the Victor videos we've made since last
Yeah,
Tuesday,
a lot of them.
and he was just talking about how like in the Euro League, obviously this is a different subset because there's so many leagues in
Mhm.
Europe. Like the Euro League is the big league, like the best one. That's the one Luca played in. That's not what Wemby's in. He's just in the French league. It's a part of the Euro League. That's a whole nother conversation that we could get into. But the main thing is, well, now I'm losing my train of thought because I rambled on about that.
You're just talking about the style of play and the physicality and the
Right.
whole
In all of those leagues, there's that is much more prevalent, and
yeah.
like the scoring is just at a much lower level. So in those types of leagues, getting 20 is like almost the equivalent of getting 30 or 35 in the NBA.
And in the playoffs. So that's the crazy thing to me.
Right.
At the end of the day, he still had 22 points
And it is
in
his
a
first
playoff game.
playoff game, I believe.
Yeah, and by far and away the best player on the court. So and the fact that they were sending double teams and triple teams and they still won pretty handedly, I felt. At the end of the game, it wasn't like they didn't have a crazy run or anything like that. They hung on to the lead and were able to get the dub. So I'm excited. All the issues that I saw were fixable.
Yeah, absolutely. And then I mean, would you just consider that stat sheet,
Yeah.
at 19 years old playing against grown men, in a pretty competitive league, like it's just good to see. So
Yeah.
they play tomorrow at 1. Y'all can check that out for sure. And I mean, it's just the same thing whenever it comes to Wemby. Really,
Yeah.
it's going to be very similar to all the highlights you've seen because they're from that same league. But hopefully he can pull a semi Luca and win the LNB coming in to the NBA. While
Mm,
like Luca won the EuroLeague. So
mm. Facts. Facts.
shout out to our man Nick. We appreciate you, an SSPN OG.
Woo.
If you
Drop a
enjoy the
line.
content, don't forget to like and subscribe below. We appreciate you guys. But let's dive into what this thumbnail is, Ethan. We got some
Mm.
lineups. Me and you made a bunch. I'm gonna give you the floor, bro. Just give me what you came up with.
First one I feel like is the most likely scenario. It doesn't deviate from like the norm all that much. So assuming that we re-sign some of these guys, that's the caveat. But here's my starting lineup. We got Trey Jones at the point, Devin, Keldon, Jeremy Sohan, and Victor Wembanyama at center. And then backing them up would be, I mean, you can put Devonte Graham in there, but I would much rather give the minutes to Blake Wesley, especially since he got a majority of his minutes in the G League and had injuries last year. Might as well throw him into the fire. So he's got the backup point for me. Then Malachi, of course. I put Julian Champagnie over Doug at the backup 3. I feel like he really played his way into some meaningful minutes, and he's young. And if he's playing poorly, then you can just sub Doug in there for him, and you don't really lose anything as far as shooting is concerned. Um, Backup 4, I have Keita Bates Diop. That could also be Mamu if we sign Mamu. You were telling me earlier he's unrestricted, so that's not guaranteed. That's also assuming that we bring back KBD, which
Mm-hmm.
I think that we will. He feels like a lifelong Spur in my eyes.
Yeah, especially with the Community Assist Award he got
Yeah.
nominated for this year. There's a lot of content the Spurs put out with him too. It just
Yes.
really feels like and with the way he played this year, I mean, becoming almost, I mean, like his improvements in his 3-point shot, not that he was
Yep.
terrible beforehand, but became much more reliable when he was wide open and just as a stretch four, putting the ball on the floor, his length.
Mhm.
The infamous moment we were talking about, sometimes he just decides not to dribble, puts the ball in the air and Euro steps because he's 6'8"
Yeah.
and he's got a long wingspan. So I could go on and on about KBD, but I mean, just especially with the addition of Wemby, like he feels like just the perfect backup for.
Agreed. Agreed. And then the backup center spot, Zach Collins, and then rounding out the rotation, Charles Bassey. And then, of course, Gorgie. I don't know if he's on a contract right now,
He is
but
not.
he's not. Then he might be gone. But I
Might
feel
be
like if
assistant
we,
coach, baby.
he could be. He could be.
Somebody
If
said that
we,
in the comments of one of our last
oh,
videos.
really?
Yeah.
If we have an open spot, I think maybe we bring him back on a minimum just because for veteran presence. But to me, that's the most likely scenario that we have next year. Do you want me to give you my other one as well, Jude, or do you want
Yes,
to? Okay.
please. Yeah. Go. You just dive into it and then I'll give
All
you
right.
mine after.
Perfect. So here's another option. This is reliant on the fact that we've talked about before. Pop has called Jeremy a natural point guard, and he showed glimpses of playmaking last year. Even took that point guard role when Trey Jones is hurt early in the season. So we got Jeremy Sohan at the point guard, Devin Vassell, Keldon Johnson, Victor Wembanyama at the 4, and then Zach Collins paired along with him in the front court. Just kind of offer some extra physicality, not force Wemby to guard some of these bigger centers that he might not be ready for. And then the bench, Trey Jones, Malachi Branham, Julian Champagnie, KBD, and Charles Bassey. And then I think Doug, Mamu, Devontae, they're kind of up in the air. I mean, Devontae and Doug obviously are under contract, but I don't think they'll get nearly as many meaningful minutes next year.
I
Devontae,
think really their minutes just depend on, well, one, what we do
injury,
this offseason if they're still on the team. But
true.
if they are on the team, I think that their minutes literally they just depend on Champagnie and Blake. And
Yeah.
I think that's much more of really a Blake Devontae conversation.
Mm,
If they
yeah.
don't feel like he's ready, I could see them saying, "Hey, Devontae, just run the point, until like December, and we're going to stick Blake in the G League again."
It's fair.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So that I think that one's much more likely. Where Champagnie and Doug, I really think it could just be like who's hot, man, because
It could be.
they're very like the only thing that Champagnie has on Doug is one, he has just much more potential because he was a rookie last season and he's 22 years old.
Yeah.
And also he's just a better. He's already. I think you could argue a better defender than
I
Doug.
think so. I think so.
But other than that, offensively, they're basically the same player.
Yeah.
Literally, like you either score on cuts, wide open layups, or taking shots.
Yeah.
So that are usually catch and shoot. So those guys I think can kind of just be interchangeable depending on injury. But I really think I agree with what you said. I think Champagnie played into that role. And man, I saw some highlights. I was getting flashbacks from the Austin
Mm-hmm.
game. There was specifically like highlights on all of his scoring plays from the Austin game where he had 26 and something else super efficient. And it just reminded me of that and watching that in person. And just seeing all those highlights today, it's just like, it just reminded me of Champagnie. And he is somebody who is a restricted free agent. His qualifying offer is like 1.7 million. So that would just be a steal
Yeah,
if
I
we
agree.
can bring him back on that.
He and Trey, I think it goes without saying. Trey Jones and Champagnie, I'm pretty sure guaranteed they're coming back next year.
Yeah.
Pretty sure.
J. June, P. Telford, I appreciate you being in the chat, man. I see you have a different opinion on Champagnie. You say he's garbage, but I think, man, you might have tuned out at the end of the year because he had like
Yeah, he was.
multiple 20-point scoring games and just was, I mean, efficient, shooting like in people's faces with confidence. That's at least what I saw from him from the end of the season. You may still differ on that opinion, but me and Ethan really like him and feel like the Spurs are going to bring him back.
Agreed.
Yeah. But getting into some other lineups, Ethan, do you have anything else on yours or you want me to dive into mine?
No, not really. It would all depend on if we bring a free agent in. It might change something, but I doubt that we make any moves in that regard. To bring anybody in that would have meaningful, rotational minutes outside of these guys.
Right. All right. Well, so when it comes to mine, I really, the more I've thought about this, Ethan, and I know I could see it not happening. And I understand how people might be like, why would you think this? But once again, with Pop's comments, not just on Sohan saying he's a point guard, but also his comments on Zach Collins at the end of the season, talking about how he feels like he's the future 5 of the Spurs moving forward.
Yeah.
Obviously, that's before you had Victor Wembanyama, so that's a big asterisk. But I really feel like he likes both of those guys at both of those spots. So my first lineup is Sohan at the point, Devin at the 2, Keldon at the 3, Wembanyama at the 4, and Zach at the 5. But here's the thing that we didn't really dive into a second ago when you mentioned that one, Ethan. And here's why I'm really convinced that the Spurs would like this and why I feel like it's the most likely, at least, and what I would want to happen, just as my opinion. The defensive versatility in this lineup is like, it's so good, dude. Like really the only, I mean, you can say if you want to point out the weak points, I mean, it's Keldon and Zach. And we talked last year all about Zach Collins' defensive improvement, not only on the interior, but also on the perimeter as the season ended. I'm not saying he's Gary Payton or anything, or that he's even Shaq, on the interior. Like he's going to still get bullied by some guys, but he's still, someone who can hold his own in the post on the perimeter. And I think a lot of that has to do with just getting more comfortable, under his legs after the injuries, as we've mentioned so many times on this channel. And then, of course, Keldon, I would argue that he's almost at a better place than Zach defensively. And I don't think that, like, just as an overall, like, rating, if you want to rate him defensively, there's still some times where he gets beat, but he has the frame and to me, when it comes to him, it's all stuff like mental stuff on defense, or it's either effort or, just IQ. And he's going to be another year better. He's going to be getting those big bucks this year. So I think that's probably something that they're focusing on in the offseason for him. And, paying him that money, I feel like we've talked about this a million times too, but I feel like they really believe in him to take that next step as well.
Yeah, it's one of the only things in his game that's not consistent. So it would make sense that it was something that got better going into next year.
Yeah, so, I mean, those are the only 2 weak points, really, you could argue in some cases. And then you've got Wembanyama, who, as we've talked about so many times, I mean, has the ability to really just block anybody at any time, no matter where he is on the court, if he just closes out.
Yeah.
The ability, as Brian Windhorst talked about, to guard the 3-point line and the rim at the same time. But even if he gets beat and confused, like sometimes there, at the minimum, he is just, I mean, he has an 8-foot wingspan. The rim protector ability that he has is just ridiculous. I don't even need to talk more about it on that point. But then you've got Sohan and Devin as well. And that's the key thing for this lineup defensively, because those are 2 guys who like already have a really strong foundation defensively and can lock guys up and get steals and have, caused problems this year. I mean, we saw it so many times. Some of the fights that Sohan got in were because of the annoyances he was causing players on defense, So the not just everybody being at least 6'6", and then having somebody like Sohan who's 6'8" at point, 7'4", and then 6'11". the defensive
Yeah.
versatility in that lineup, I just think would be it would be pretty. I don't want to over exaggerate by saying it would be scary, because I still think the Spurs are going to be sub 40 wins next season. But
For
at the
sure.
same time, I think down the line that is a potentially there's a lot of defensive potential there, and with all the length in that lineup, I mean, you're going to be clogging passing lanes a lot.
It's something to keep an eye on for sure. I wouldn't be surprised at all if that's what we rolled out to start the year, because we're trying to get back to that defensive identity that we were, you know, so identified by. It's such a stupid way to say it, but you know what I'm trying to say.
Right, right.
We were a defensive team.
That
So
was, yeah.
to get back to that would make a lot of sense. And looking at the comments right now, a lot of people are talking about Keldon going to the bench, or even Jeremy going to the bench. And it's a discussion that might need to happen in the next couple of years. But as of right now, I don't see anybody available that's a big enough boost over those two guys. In my eyes, Jude, do you see anything like that right
Yeah,
now?
I don't. Maybe down the line, that's what
Yeah,
ends up happening, or maybe if there's like a weird scenario where, like, there's an injury and like Pop feels like it's better for one of them, for the bench
yeah,
to just have more firepower. But I think definitely both of those guys are going to be in the starting lineup next year for
yeah.
sure.
At least for
Um,
this next year, yeah,
like
definitely.
I was listening to Tim McMahon's Howdy Partners podcast on YouTube before this. He's a
Yeah,
guy, NBA analyst for ESPN, and also a Texas native, I'm pretty sure, which I was just realizing with the name and everything. And he had Kirk Goldsberry on, who used to work for the Spurs front office and is a scout as well, and also has Texas roots. So that was just kind of cool to like see that podcast. I didn't know it existed. But one of the things they were talking about in there was how Pop, like a conversation he had with Tim, he was comparing Sohan to Ginobili. Like,
yeah.
and not just like in a style of play sense. That's not at all what he meant, but in his competitive drive and, his fire underneath him to just get better as well. And you saw that with the free throw this year, and
Hmm.
the shooting improvements, and all that he got it better everywhere. And that was the thing that was most exciting about him as a prospect. So, um, man, yeah. I mean, definitely those two guys, Keldon, whenever it comes to just his contract that he has, and then Pop thinking of Sohan that way, and him starting for most of this year. I think both of those guys will be in the starting lineup.
I agree. I agree. I'm just trying to think right now, and if it's a guarantee, Jude, that Wemby's going to play the 4, which would mean Zach Collins is playing the 5 next year. I like Jeremy at the point. I see someone in the comments, Fanico, comparing him to Ben Simmons a little bit early in his career. Hopefully, he's better than Ben Simmons long term. Knock on wood. Other people, like our boy TSR, have compared him to Scottie Pippen, and Scottie Pippen's point forward, kind of being the originator at that spot. Um, but if it's not him at the point, maybe Devin at the point. Like, I think what I'm really asking here is, if it's not Trey going to the bench, who? Because I don't think that's a question.
Um, yeah, I don't really think
I don't
that's a
think it is.
question either. I mean, it would be Zach. That would be the only one if you wanted to start Trey. And that's my other lineup that I have,
Go
which
ahead.
is Trey Jones, Devin Vassell, Keldon Johnson, Jeremy Sohan, and Victor Wembanyama.
Mhm.
So that's and yeah, I mean, I really don't see it. Now I will say that Hanova's comment here,
Good
just
point.
saying that
Good
Sohan
point.
won Sixth Man of the Year at Baylor, and he was just compared to Manu, so
True.
that ties in as well. Kind of beats my own argument there.
He's very.
Um, was made to come off the bench and affect the game, same as Manu. So I understand that, but I just don't think that that's like when Pop said that. I think he's going to be a starting caliber player moving forward. I think he started as a rookie, and I know that it's a little bit different, but with the point guard comments and that, I would be very surprised if he came off the bench. I wouldn't hate it, but I would be very surprised.
Yeah, and the important thing to remember that we're all forgetting is, with all the excitement of Wembanyama coming to the team, we're still, like you said, going to be definitely sub 40 wins next year, probably mid 30s.
Mm-hmm.
Fighting for that 10
The
spot, if at
the
all.
Magic, and I know Banchero, that you could say that there's a gap between Banchero and Wembanyama, although I don't think that it's all that huge. Although I still believe in Wembanyama. Okay, that might be a little bit premature to say, but as of right now, I don't think that it's like, we can't say that it's the most giant thing until we see Wembanyama in the league. That's another
Yeah,
discussion. But the point is, they had the number 1 pick last year and went 34 and 48, and they kind of have a lot of surrounding talent of other picks like Devin Vassell, Keldon Johnson, and all the young guys that we kind of had on the roster. Obviously, their version of that is Cole Anthony, RJ Hampton, Franz
Mhm.
Wagner, Jonathan Isaac, Mo Wagner,
Yeah,
etc. But
yeah. The point I was trying to get
similar
there.
situation.
Yeah,
Sorry,
very
sorry to
no,
cut you
no, no,
off.
no, you're fine. But I was leading to how many games is Wemby really going to play next year? Like probably
We're not sure yet.
50 to 60,
Yeah,
maybe. And barring injury, I just think that the Spurs will probably play this slow. And this is another thing they were talking about on Howdy Partners podcast. I also listened to the same one. And that's probably very accurate. And if that's the case, we're going to see a lot of different lineups than just the two or three that we're talking about right now. Pop
very
might pull
true.
some
Think
weird
about
stuff out
this
of his
year.
pocket. Yeah,
And I
exactly.
know it's different, but still, it's not like we're contending next season.
Exactly. Exactly. And I don't have a problem with that. And we've seen Oklahoma City, they had Chet Holmgren. I mean, I know he was hurt, but they set him for an entire year. He probably didn't need to really sit for the entire year, but they were kind of trying to get a higher pick. Uh, it's possible the Spurs do kind of the same thing this year that we did last year. I know we don't really want that, especially with season ticket purchases going through the roof right now, and fans being as excited as they are. But we could very well be in a very similar spot next season, and I think we just need to kind of temper excitement a little bit and stay grounded because it's a very real possibility.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. But the main thing is like it's not, okay, now we're gonna win the championship this next season. It's in the future because of, just the enigma of a prospect he is. Nike's promoting him as a
Yeah,
supernova. Like y'all get what I'm saying. So but I did have one more lineup, Ethan, that
go
I
ahead.
think potentially could be the case. This is the only other thing I think could happen.
Let's hear it.
Unless, like you said, Pop just throws out something that none of us expect, which could be a possibility. But Malachi at the point, Devin, Keldon, Sohan, Wembenyama. So not really too different. It's just starting Malachi. If they and I mean, we saw that a little bit last year, and I
Yeah.
also think that's an interesting thought with shooting as well, because Wembenyama went 1 for 2 in that playoff game, but that was his first three he had made in a while. I still think the potential on his jump shot and eventually becoming, I mean, if you go watch the G League Ignite tape, I think his shot's going to translate just fine in the 2 games he played against them.
Yeah.
But it's not perfect yet. It's still a work in progress. He's still 19 years old, and that's still got some work to do down the line. So I think if that's something that they feel a little bit concerned with, because we saw Keldon can be, as much as I still think his 3-point shot improved last season, we saw him go cold at sometimes this season, and Sohan's not a reliable 3-point shooter yet.
Yeah.
And if you have Trey in that starting lineup, you know what I'm saying? Like
I do.
if Keldon's having a bad day, then you really got four, and Wemby's having a bad day, like you really got four non-shooters in the lineup. You're just left with Devin. So, and also just with his season is being overshadowed by Sohan, and
Mhm.
then when you add the Wemby thing, he's just way more down the drain. I just knocked over something there,
No, you're fine.
doing some hand gestures here. But anyways, the point is Malachi, like he still has. I mean, who knows what he could be? He's just turning, I mean, I don't know if it's been his birthday yet, but he's going to be 20 going into next season.
Yeah.
And we saw him improve tremendously last year. And especially if they're like, if maybe the development, say Blake has a bad summer league and, is still just kind of really an Austin Spur next season, that could
Mhm.
even increase that possibility as well. Now, maybe none of this happens. I'm still on the Sohan at point train. That's what I would do. Probably if you wanted to bet on the most realistic, it's probably Trey, Devin, Keldon, Sohan, Wembenyama. But
Mhm.
especially if they don't like the shooting, I think that there's a real argument for that.
I could see that. I could see that for sure. And you're right. Malachi had a very under the radar improvement last year that's overshadowed by everything, and now is even more overshadowed by the number one pick coming in to the team. The only counter argument I would have for not
No,
putting him at the point
please,
guard is coming off the bench. He is that immediate spark plug, and he's so
the
important
main
to the
scorer.
identity of that bench mob. Like he comes in, what? What are you
No,
saying?
keep going, keep going.
Oh, that.
I have a counter argument to this
Okay, all
actually,
right.
but go ahead.
Then he comes in and he's immediately both a ball handler and an off-ball shooter. He can space the floor, sit in the corner, come off screens, cut, and he can facilitate and create his own shot. I could argue, other than Devin, he might be the second best shot creator for himself on the team. Actually, I don't even think there's an argument there. I think he is the second best shot creator on the team.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because Keldon, like, while Keldon is a better scorer than Malachi as of right now, it's not his, off the dribble moves. It's his big body nickname. Like it's him
Yes,
bullying people
he's
to
getting it in the
score.
paint.
When it comes to a straight up bag, I think definitely it's Malachi after Devin. And this is after his rookie season. Like, and
Yes,
I know that it was a 22-60 team, but like, anyways, he's
yeah.
somebody, remember, but we'll go back. He was supposed to be a lottery pick, and we got him at 20.
Very interesting to see what he does. And he's one of the only guys as well, and correct me if I'm wrong, because I follow all these dudes on social media, and for the most part, especially the young guys, they post when they're in the gym, getting that work in,
Mm-hmm.
picture of their sneakers. He's been kind of radio silent, other than like liking other people's stuff and commenting on the Spurs posts. But I really haven't seen that much, boosting his own profile in a way. So to me, that's better. I like that because in my eyes, that means he's privately working, and really hitting his nose to the grindstone. Um,
Talking about you were talking about Malachi there.
yeah,
I
Malachi.
got a
Yeah,
little
no, you're fine. Yeah, Malachi.
disconfigured, but yes, okay, yeah, no, that I love that because he's like, okay, I was already overlooked, even though I mean the
Yeah.
Spurs aren't overlooking him; they know what they have, but I mean that just embodies the Spurs, honestly, and
Yeah.
this is just making me think about his ties, with LeBron. Not saying he's going to be LeBron, but just being the only other like player really to get to the NBA and go to a high level college like Ohio State out of that school. So
Mm,
there's a lot of Malachi is definitely somebody who he probably feels like he's being slept on a little bit, and rightfully
probably.
so.
But what was
But
your corner argument? Yeah.
yes, so here's the thing in that lineup, Zach is on the bench. You
Mm,
see what I'm saying? So,
yeah.
like, now I still agree with you. I still think, like, I would like to see Malachi off the bench just because I think that would, like, when it comes to overall lineups, that's why I prefer the other two. You could, or maybe not the other two, but the Sohan lineup specifically. But in this lineup, I think Zach could make up for that scoring load. And the other thing is, what I put down is obviously Trey would be the backup point if he's not starting, right? And he would be the main six man too. I don't think he's going to necessarily make up for the scoring load, but you can play Champagny and Doug. But if Blake
Ooh,
takes that next step, maybe, I mean, Blake's 6'4", 6'5". He's a
yeah.
combo guard. He came in as a combo guard, and really he was more of a scorer at Notre Dame. This year, they were trying to develop all those point guard habits. He could play the 2-2 if he has it. I mentioned, maybe he has a bad summer league, but if he really takes a jump this year, he's
Mm.
still 20 years old. Maybe he ends up being the 2 there. But obviously that's a very specific scenario if Malachi ends up being the point. But that was just the only other like feasible thing I could think of,
No, that's a good point.
or like realistic.
I didn't think about Doug and Champagny playing together, and Zach Collins on the bench as well, because that
You go
immediately.
Trey, Champagny, Doug, KBD, Zach.
Yeah, yeah, I didn't think about that. That's also, I mean, that's versatile, and you got
Lengthy
shooters.
lineup too.
You got shooters. You got a low post threat, and you got a point guard that can get them all the ball where they like it. So
I feel
that
like
makes sense.
I'm talking myself into this more.
It makes sense, but then we go
Malachi
back.
needs to be on the bench though. Not
Yeah,
because he's not a starting caliber player, but just because like you said, the best shot creator on the team just individually with handles, unless, I mean, we'll see with Victor.
yep, that's true.
Maybe he comes in, you know what I'm saying?
Hmm.
But it's Devin. So you want to even that out and have both of that in your starting and your bench unit.
Hmm.
That's why you'd want Malachi there.
Agreed, agreed. But and then we come back to the thing where I think Alea, I'm sorry if I'm pronouncing your name wrong, but she brings up a good point. Wemby isn't a five. He's 7'3", 7'4", but I would rather play him at the four.
Me
And I
too.
think playing him next to Zach Collins would only help him a lot because Zach would take all the beatings for him. He would protect him. Zach and Jeremy are going to get into a lot of fights this next season. I'm calling it right now because they're going to have you
They
so.
already do.
They already do,
They
but now
did this year.
they have a number one pick, Jude. That is, I mean, knock on wood, could be fragile. He's thinner. He's foreign. He's coming over from France. He's young, and people are going to try and pick on him because of his size. Bigger guys will bully him. They'll push him around. The Morris twins, I'm sure, will get their wax in at him. And here we got Jeremy Sohan and Zach Collins, who are not going to. They're not going to live. They're not going to stand up for that. You know what I mean? So that'll be interesting dynamic to watch as well.
Oh yeah, and especially with all that talk that
Yeah.
old boy Jeremy's been talking, it's gonna
Ooh.
be it'll be a fun year. But I love it. I love it. I
Me
love
too.
because that's the other thing. Going back to the Howdy Partners podcast, that's the thing that Kirk Goldsberry was talking about when it comes to his evaluation. So obviously you have the comments from Pop, and that
Mm-hmm.
ties into what he said. He said the thing about Sohan is not just his potential on the court, but between the ears is the way
Yes.
he described it. He's wired different. And I completely agree because people in his position aren't tweeting that type of stuff, bro. Like, I think that's a perfect example of how he's wired differently. But I
Yeah.
like that he's not afraid of anybody and he's not going to take anything. And
Yeah.
and also that it also kind of all of it, even though the Spurs aren't um the type of team to kind of promote that, like talking trash and stuff like that. I would say that the way that Sohan does it,
Yeah.
like, is if the Spurs were gonna do it, that's how it would be. Does that make sense?
No, you're completely right. Because I was trying to think of what separates him from Dylan Brooks and guys like that is it's not it's there's two things. One, he's not really trying to boost his own profile,
And he's still
and
20.
yeah, he's still 20, and he's
Just
kind of
20.
it's almost like he's just like teasing, like it's cheeky, like he said on draft night. He's just having fun, like it's playful. I feel like he would say this to LeBron's face as a joke, and LeBron
Yeah.
would probably like laugh and maybe push him away and whatever. But like it's not meant to be disrespectful, if that makes
Yeah,
sense.
like him putting the quotes on
Yeah,
King was
King,
obviously to get all the Lakers fans in his
yes,
replies,
and
like,
it
which is
worked.
yeah, right, exactly.
I'm sorry, Jude. You talk for 2 minutes. I got to use the restroom
Oh,
really
you're
bad, so
good.
I'm gonna
You're good, brother.
take my camera off for a sec.
You're good,
BRB.
brother. Alrighty, chat. Thank y'all for hanging out with us for this first 30 minutes of chat. I know there's a lot of disagreements here, but we appreciate you guys being in here and sharing your opinions and debating and all that good stuff. Um, Man, it's just been kind of a whirlwind since Tuesday when the Spurs won the draft lottery. I mean, the moment I've seen so many memes, whether it's the Charlotte Hornets being up on the screen, that's something I'll never forget. I'm gonna be thankful for LaMelo and Jordan for forever. And think about that from the Hornets perspective. Like, if you're Michael Jordan and you're about to sell the franchise, and it's like, this is the draft with one of the most generational players ever. All scouts are saying, like I said earlier, Nike's already promoting him as a supernova. They were handing out hats saying Wemby with an alien next to it in France when Brian Brinkhorst was out there reporting on it whenever the draft lottery was happening. And then it's like, and the Spurs come in once again and they end up stealing the number one pick. If I was Michael Jordan, I would be so mad because the difference in the amount of money that he could have sold the franchise for with Wembanyama versus without Wembanyama is a big chunk of cash. And I know that Michael Jordan isn't somebody who's fiending for money, that's for sure. But I was just talking about how mad Michael Jordan probably was that they got the second pick
Oh,
because he's
I
about to
know.
sell the franchise. And imagine
Hurts.
how much money he would have gotten, dude,
Mm,
if he would have had Wembanyama. So,
hurts so bad. Poor MJ.
Ethan, how are you feeling? I know you were talking about staying grounded earlier, and I completely
Hmm.
agree with that. But what are your other thoughts? That was another thing I was saying, while you were gone. I was just talking about how it's been a whirlwind kind of since
Yeah.
last Tuesday. Not only in the sense of our channel, but just even me as a fan internally. I'm like, oh my gosh, like even
Mhm.
watching the game, it's like, okay, there's some things that, maybe could concern me, but I don't want to overblow them in my head because I know what all the scouts are saying. You kind of get the
Yeah,
vibe that I'm feeling here.
I do completely. And while I say stay grounded, I'm also extremely excited. Like, don't get me
Right.
wrong. Like, I am beyond excited to see him play. And more so than that, I feel so bad for Keldon and Devin because I feel like they're being so disrespected right now by a lot of people, including Spurs fans. It's to
Yeah.
some level. Like, I know that they're not at this point all stars, but Keldon averaged 20 last year. Devin, when he was playing like consistently, was averaging basically 20 as well.
I think he averaged 18, but he proved
Yeah,
he can
he
have
can
20 a
average
night.
20.
Yeah.
He can average 20, especially late in the year when he was finally coming back from injury and kind of getting that rust off.
His
Um,
knee wasn't sore
yeah,
chronically anymore.
yes. And for those of you that don't agree with me, go watch the highlights from the Atlanta Hawks game in March. I was there for that game, and he was on
Go to Jazz game
the Jazz
too.
game too. I think I was there for that one as well.
Yes, you were.
I'm just a
He
good luck
showed
charm
out.
for
No,
Devin.
Devin sees Ethan in the stands. He's like, I'm going Kobe.
He must be a big Harry Potter fan. He's a huge Harry Potter fan.
I
Wants to
love it.
impress me.
Big Harry Potter guy, Devin
Yeah,
Vassell.
for sure, for sure. But what I was saying is those guys are going to play a lot better next to Wembanyama, and I think you can argue if you want about are they a second or third option on a championship team?
Right.
Maybe third and fourth. I don't know if we necessarily have our second best option. But they're definitely good players, and we're about to find out exactly how good they are.
That's what I'm saying, dude. They didn't pay Keldon 20 million for
Yeah,
nothing. Even if they end up moving, like even if down the line, they decide we want to pay Sohan and Devin,
yeah,
and save the rest of the money for Wembanyama whenever we have to give him the biggest contract in NBA history.
yeah, yeah.
If
True.
everything works out, let's think about that right now. I didn't even. That's the first time I've
No, you're
really thought
right.
about that. Oh my lord, that'll be interesting. But like they didn't pay him 20 million for nothing. Like I feel like they believe he's got to have at least all-star potential. You don't pay somebody that much if you don't.
And if you watched
And I'm not saying this season, I'm saying eventually.
eventually, yeah.
Yeah.
And if you watched the not the highlights, if you watched consistently the season last year, I know it was difficult at times because we were losing so many games. But you and I watched, what do you think, 70 games
At least
minimum?
60.
Yeah, 60 to 70, I'd say. And
Yeah.
Keldon Johnson played a majority of them. I know Devin was hurt for a lot of them as well, but he was the reason we were winning a lot of those games. I mean, 22 games, but he was keeping us afloat
No, dude,
for the
I made
majority
that
of the
same
season.
point. Like after the Austin game, dude, that was exactly what happened in that game. And it was like,
Hmm.
yes, it's only 22 games, but still the ones that we won, man, it was because of
Oh,
him. And a lot of the ones that were close that we ended up losing, the reason we were in it was because of his fourth quarter
yeah,
specifically. There would be so many games where he'd have 15, 12, 13, not playing that great, but in the fourth quarter, it didn't matter how, it might have not even been the prettiest. It might just be getting to the free throw line. But
yeah,
by the end, he would have 20, man. And that's why he averaged 22 this year.
yeah,
Anyways.
yeah. I mean, he improved in so many areas, especially offensively during the season and going into the season. I feel like he just had a different kind, not a bag necessarily, but he had more options at his disposal as far as scoring the ball. And if you want to point at some inefficiency, sure, maybe, but at the same time, like we've been saying, he was literally by himself for maybe 50 games this year. So
That's the crazy thing, man. He was playing with like think about it like if Devin had to do that, it would have been the same thing.
yeah, it
If it
would have
was
been.
if it was flipped in the inverse and Keldon was the one out for that long.
And on the rare occasion late in the year, we had Trey, Devin, Keldon, Sohan, Zach, and Malachi coming off the bench with Dougie and Mamu. Like, we had some really solid games. Think back on the Denver game where Zach got ejected for trying to square up with Michael Porter Jr. We
Hmm.
ended up winning that game.
I
A
was
lot of
there for
credit
that
to
one.
Mamu. You were there for that one. Mamu went crazy, but
Me and
that's a really
bro,
big win.
we're the magic charm, man. That's what
Apparently,
I'm.
we are.
There are only 22 wins this year, bro, and like I was 2-1 this year, and I mean the Alamo Dome was kind of still a win anyway. Like we weren't going in that thinking we were going to win. It's like let's just have a party in the Alamo Dome right now, and I got to
Yeah.
watch Steph Curry warm up. Anyways,
Yeah.
incredible.
So to summarize, I'm a big fan of Keldon Johnson. I don't believe he's getting nearly as many roses as he should.
Yes,
Um,
both of them.
Devin as well, yes, and I'm extremely excited to those two almost together. More so excited to see them with Wemby than I am to just see Wemby. Does that make sense?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I'm excited to see what
We,
Wemby
we
does for
didn't
them.
really get to see them on the court together that
Not
much
that much, yeah.
last season. Like it was very, maybe like 20, 30 games, maybe. Like
Hmm.
30 is probably a stretch. It's probably more like 20. So, because a lot of times we wouldn't play them together because we were tanking.
Yeah, exactly. And if you're
So,
in the arena, I don't know how many of the people in the comments went to a live game this year, but his energy kept the arena alive. Like, had it not been for
dude.
Keldon, it would have been a dismal year in that arena.
And it wasn't just in San Antonio. He did it in
Hmm.
Austin too.
Yep.
And that was when it was sold out. And I mean, it was just like because the stadium's a little bit smaller. It was just like rah! And I just remember when like Keldon came back in and had 12, and then had 24 by the end of the game. So he came in and scored. In the fourth quarter, the total he'd scored the first three quarters. Like when he just erupted in a scream, and the whole place went crazy after thinking we were gonna lose to this
Mm,
Trailblazers team that's like it's finally a team that we can play that's like playing
yeah.
players like us. That was such a like it was so hype, man. And then the way that he was talking to everybody afterwards, I mean, Keldon's energy is infectious for sure.
He is San Antonio, like through and through. He is San Antonio, and I'm excited for him. And Leah just put the stat up for us. Jeremy, Devin, and Keldon only played 19 games together last year. I'm curious how
Yeah,
many of those were wins.
right, right.
I don't actually know, but and now you add Wemby to that.
For sure, for sure. I saw some stuff in the chat there, and I don't know. I'm not sure. This is see if this has something else in the actual YouTube chat, that's why I was a little thrown off there. I'm sorry, but this is how we see it on our end. But
Mm.
anything else, Ethan? Any other thoughts you got, man?
No, not really, man. I'm just excited, and sure, point guard play is something that we will need to address eventually, especially if Blake Wesley doesn't work out. Knock on wood. I'm hoping that he does. But for now, Trey Jones looks like our only natural point guard, and we're gonna have to fill in the rest. But I'm not too super worried about that because now that I think about it, Jude, we've really never been a dominant point guard team. Like I know TP was a great point guard for his era, but especially when I really started getting into the Spurs, like 2011 forward, like we were win by committee, like play make by committee. Everybody had like 4 assists a game. Like it wasn't one guy getting 12 and everybody else getting 2. So that's probably where we're
Definitely.
gonna eventually mean back out to.
Yeah.
For now.
Yeah. Lots of stuff, Ethan. Lots of stuff to think about. And, there was a lot of stuff contract wise that we didn't even get into
Oh
with
yeah.
this. We kind of really, we just assumed that Trey and KBD are coming back, but there could be a world where both of them don't come back.
Yeah.
KBD is an unrestricted free agent, although I feel very confident in him. I almost think it's more likely that Trey would get moved, especially if moving so hand to the point is what they want to end up doing. But I saw Jeff Garcia, Jeff G Spurs Zone. He made a podcast about Trey Jones's future with the Spurs, kind of thinking about, just with the Wemby move, and specifically if that playing him at the 4 moves Jeremy to the point, like I was just kind of referencing. I don't know. He has some intel, so definitely him talking about it kind of caught my eye.
I'm paying Trey Jones. Sorry,
yeah,
go ahead.
No, you're good. I like Trey Jones. I like Trey Jones as I do think on a championship team he's a backup. But I feel like he would be I want to use him like Tyus. Like we want to compensate. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So.
And he's consistently lived up to our expectations. I know not many people had expectations when we drafted him, but I still remember, those of you that are new here, we appreciate you being here, but go watch our podcast from when Trey Jones was a rookie. We were talking about his summer league play and his G League play, and we were like, bro, this guy's got some game. And I think I tweeted out like in 2018 or 19, like, everybody go watch Trey Jones. Or when did we draft him? 20? It was the Devin draft.
2018. That's 2018.
I don't remember. Whenever we drafted him.
That was 2018. Devin and Trey were 2018.
Tweeting out about him being like really underrated, and he's proved us completely right. I don't remember when he was drafted. It doesn't matter. But he's a solid backup, and he's consistently proved me correct, so I'm hoping that he'll continue to do so.
Yeah. There was something else I was going to say about Trey when I got into it, but I'm losing my train of thought here. So
your Trey,
my train of thought. Oh my gosh,
I'm on that Trey train.
Now I feel like I gotta think of it. I don't know. I like Trey Jones. It would be sad if he ended up getting moved. I think he's a really solid point guard to have on your roster.
Agreed.
And maybe he can, if he can take a step forward with his jump shot, maybe he can become a starting caliber player. But as of right now, I would say that I feel like probably his ceiling is a, like Tyus, basically.
Yeah. Agreed.
So it was 2020. So we were both off. We were both big off. Thank y'all in the comments. We appreciate you guys. Yeah, when I said that, I was like, I think Keldon might have been 2018.
Yeah, I saw 18 was Lonnie.
Oh my gosh.
19 was Luka and
I'm
Keldon.
thinking they're like their classes. Like Keldon was a 2018 high school grad and then was great. That's what I was. And then 2019 was Trey. Well, Trey wasn't. He played 2 years in college, and so did Devin. So actually, they were the same grade.
Whatever it is.
They're all the same age. Anyways.
Yeah, pretty much.
Well, Ethan, I'm trying to think of other stuff to say, but I don't really have anything, to be honest, other than the fact that we've talked about these lineups. Really, it all depends on what the Spurs front office decides. Maybe we should have just said that and stopped the podcast to start.
Make it a 3-minute podcast. It's all up to the front office.
Just kidding. Major just kidding. But...
No, fair point.
Alrighty. Well, we appreciate all of you guys being in here today. Don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe below. If you want to stay updated with the show, follow us on Twitter. You can watch us there at SSPN on YT, at Jude McLaren, and at Ethan_Quintero. 52 of you guys in here to end this tonight. This is probably one of our biggest streams that we've had in a while. And we appreciate all of you guys coming and hanging out with us tonight. We appreciate y'all. We'll catch y'all on the next one. Go Spurs, go.